I knew that you were going to be a giant star. I really did.
Well, thank you.
What I didn't know is that you were going to get so sexy.
Well, I always knew you would
What?
be sexy.
I owe Michael an explanation to the world. Those haunting words open the latest chapter in the life of Diana Ross. At 81, with the spotlight slowly fading, the Queen of Motown has finally spoken out about one of the most troubling questions in music history. Why did Michael Jackson, a soul long seen as fragile and deeply lonely, appear in multiple photographs alongside Jeffrey Epstein? But the real drama isn't in the images themselves. It lies in what happened behind the scenes. According to close sources and recent interviews, Diana Ross admits that she was the unwitting yet fateful bridge connecting Michael Jackson to Epstein. She once believed Epstein's network was a safe space, a place where Jackson could find financial backing and absolute privacy, the very things the king of pop longed for most. What she never imagined was that behind the glitter of elite parties lurked a dark web, one that Michael, with his innocence and excessive trust in others, unknowingly stepped into. The veil of secrecy is slowly lifting. What did Diana Ross really see? How deeply did she regret watching her spiritual son get pulled into controversies with no way out? The truth is about to be revealed. The Epstein system, power cover-ups, and delay. When Jeffrey Epstein is mentioned, most of the public tends to think of him as a disgraced individual, a controversial figure. But that view, however common, unintentionally minimizes the true nature of the problem. Epstein was not dangerous because of who he was as a person. Epstein was dangerous because he was a system. For decades, Epstein did not operate as a politician. He held no public office and represented no official institution. He functioned in a gray zone where money, relationships, and silence were perfectly interwoven. That is precisely what made Epstein a unique junction. Not a center of power, but a connector of power. He knew how to access the wealthy, how to appear in discreet spaces, how to make his presence seem normal within elite circles that outsiders could never enter. And above all, Epstein understood a core principle of the upper world: not everything needs to be said out loud. What set Epstein apart from many other infamous figures in history was not the level of noise surrounding him, but the depth of his infiltration. He did not need formal authority because he operated on a different kind of power, the power of connection. In that world, a single introduction can be worth more than a contract. The right relationship at the right moment can open doors that money alone cannot buy. And the right silence at the right time can shield an entire network. One of the most intriguing concepts surrounding Epstein is the so-called client list. It is a phrase that appears repeatedly in the media, in public speculation, and in unofficial discussions. Yet the authorities involved, particularly the Department of Justice, have repeatedly stated that no such official list exists in the way the public imagines. As references to Epstein-related files began to surface, the focus quickly shifted to a different question: why has their release taken so long? And it was within that very context that a new law emerged: the Epstein Files Transparency Act. When truth comes at the cost of time, why did it take until 2026? Why did it require years of public pressure, lawsuits, hearings, and leaks before nearly 3 million pages of Epstein-related files were finally brought into the light? It was a nerve-wracking battle of strategy among powerful institutions. From former U.S. presidents and tech billionaires to members of royal families, all appeared in Epstein's flight logs or contact books. Their presence created an invisible pressure on the FBI and the DOJ, making the investigation move at a strangely sluggish pace. After years of delay, piecemeal leaks, congressional hearings, and consecutive lawsuits from both the media and attorneys representing victims, the U.S. Congress was forced to act. The law was passed with a clear objective to require the Department of Justice to release all unclassified records related to Jeffrey Epstein in a searchable and downloadable format. It wasn't until late January 2026 that the first major releases began. According to internal estimates, federal agencies hold roughly 6 million pages of documents connected to Epstein. Yet by that point, only just over 3 million pages had been made public. As you turn through the declassified files, you encounter countless lines blacked out. Officials say the redactions are meant to protect victims' privacy. But is this truly about safeguarding those who were harmed, or is the black ink being used to shield powerful figures? When the 3 million pages of Epstein files were released amid a flood of influential names from politics and high finance, one name was suddenly pushed to the top of the hottest headlines: Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, the perfect scapegoat. Have you ever wondered why, among a long list of figures who actually hold the fate of the world in their hands, public attention keeps zeroing in on an artist who has been dead for decades? The answer lies in that very name: Michael Jackson. MJ was not just an artist, he was a global icon. At the same time, he became one of the most dissected and mischaracterized figures in the history of modern media. The media understands one simple truth: place MJ's name next to any sensitive keyword, and you instantly have a borderless media explosion. For decades, stories about Michael's unconventional lifestyle shaped a ready-made bias in the public mind. So when the Epstein files emerged, instead of having to explain complex legal terms like the Clinton Foundation or DOJ procedures, the media only needed to mention MJ. It functioned like a psychological button, instantly drawing the crowd's attention without forcing them to question the truly powerful figures behind the scenes. A name without a crime. Across thousands of Epstein-related PDF pages, the name and image of Michael Jackson MJ appear as a highly controversial focal point. Yet what's striking is what's missing. There are no timestamps, no locations, no contextual explanations attached to those images. And most importantly, there is absolutely no line anywhere describing Michael as being involved in any illegal act or crime connected to Epstein. Michael's presence in the files in terms of substance is empty, but in terms of media impact, it carries enormous weight. Observers point out that simply inserting MJ into the documents turns him into a built-in media magnet. Because of MJ's scandal-heavy past, his name becomes a perfect piece of bait, diverting public attention away from far more powerful individuals who are still in office. Meanwhile, names that are more powerful, more dangerous, and far more capable of triggering real political shockwaves gradually fade into the background, buried beneath layers of black ink and selective silence. And that is precisely why Michael Jackson, despite never being accused, never being prosecuted, and never being linked to any criminal charge in the Epstein files, becomes the perfect scapegoat in a story where the truth is constantly delayed, distorted, and controlled. The photos that once shocked the world. The mysterious photograph of Michael and Epstein, just one photograph, just a single moment standing side by side, and that was enough to set the internet on fire. The image of Michael Jackson next to Jeffrey Epstein quickly became the center of global controversy. Yet the deeper you dig, the more that photograph turns out to be empty of information. No one knows where the photo was taken. No one knows when. There is no legal document anywhere that describes the context of that meeting. Some of Michael's former security guards have even said it was nothing more than a brief, polite encounter with no special significance. But that too remains internet chatter, not legal evidence. A key testimony under oath. The most specific and most credible detail does not come from social media. It comes from sworn testimony by Johanna Schoberg, one of the primary victims in the case. Johanna stated that she encountered Michael Jackson at Epstein's residence in Palm Beach, Florida. Michael was there as a guest in the context of a meeting or work-related visit. However, Johanna Schoberg clearly affirmed under oath that there was no inappropriate behavior of any kind between her and Michael Jackson. There were also no reports indicating that he participated in any illicit activities taking place at the residence. If Michael Jackson truly had deep ties to Epstein, the evidence would not stop at a single vague photograph. But reality points in the opposite direction. In Epstein's flight logs and passenger lists, names like Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew appear repeatedly. Michael Jackson's does not. There is no record of him flying to the private island, no travel logs, no pattern of repeated meetings. This absence is a detail the media often overlooks, even though it speaks volumes. A social connection, not a friendship. If there was ever a point of intersection between Michael Jackson and Jeffrey Epstein, it was not a close friendship, but the complex social web of Hollywood's elite. In 2002, Michael was reportedly introduced to Epstein at his office to discuss financial or legal matters. At that time, Epstein was still cultivating his image as a billionaire asset manager for the ultra-wealthy, a name not yet publicly tied to scandal. In the world of A-list celebrities seeking out self-styled power brokers who promise financial access, privacy protection, or elite connections is not unusual. Epstein was particularly skilled at collecting famous names to polish his own reputation. Michael's appearance at Epstein's home may simply reflect Epstein's self-promotion strategy, rather than any deliberate choice or deep involvement on Michael's part. Another photograph that stirred public uproar was even more explosive: the MJ, Bill Clinton, Diana Ross photo. The image features Michael Jackson, Bill Clinton, and the woman standing beside them is Diana Ross. What startled the public was that the faces of several children in the photo were blurred, creating an unsettling impression. But when the image is placed back into its proper context, the truth looks entirely different. Those children are the children of Michael Jackson and Diana Ross identities that have been public knowledge for more than 2 decades. The photograph was taken at a public Democratic Party fundraiser at the Apollo Theater, a major event widely covered by the media at the time. No secrecy, no private setting, no hidden agenda. So why was a public non-criminal image pulled into files associated with Epstein? Investigative journalists describe this as a textbook case of visual framing. Blur a few faces, strip away the context, place the image in the wrong file, and suddenly the public is led to look in the wrong direction. The audience is guided to focus on celebrities where emotions ignite most easily, while the truly powerful figures, those capable of triggering real political shockwaves, are blurred out, obscured, or quietly removed from the frame. And sometimes the most frightening thing isn't what you see, but what someone has deliberately made sure you don't see. The game of image control. The most dramatic detail lies in a series of PDFs with missing page numbers. After the first wave of releases, observers noticed that a photograph had been temporarily removed. It was an image featuring a sitting president, Melania Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell. Only after public outrage and mounting questions did the photo reappear in the files. The Department of Justice claimed the removal was merely a technical error, with no intent behind it. But to many analysts, this became ironclad evidence that authorities were caught red-handed attempting to control which images the public was allowed to see. This is no longer about a single photograph. This is a story about control over imagery. Who is allowed to appear? Who is allowed to disappear? And at the most sensitive moment, who is pushed to the front simply to give the public something else to look at? Michael Jackson in these files is not portrayed as a perpetrator. He functions more like a brilliant shield placed forward to protect those standing in the shadows. A deceased artist, a name long associated with controversy. A safe target unable to respond, unable to sue, unable to defend himself. Meanwhile, the figures who are still alive, still powerful, and still capable of causing genuine political upheaval, are protected by black ink, by gaps in the record, by perfectly timed technical errors. And that is why the truth within the Epstein files does not lie in the faces brought into the light, but in the names the system wants the public to forget as quickly as possible. Who is Diana Ross in this power play within America's elite circles? Diana Ross is not just an artist, she is a force. She represents one of the rare embodiments of the American dream, a black woman who rose from Motown, broke through racial barriers, and became a global icon. Her influence extends far beyond music, reaching into fashion and especially politics. To Michael Jackson, Diana Ross was nothing less than a second mother, a mentor and a guardian figure. From the time he was a frail little boy in the Jackson 5, Diana Ross possessed a privilege few could claim. She was both a queen of the arts and an honored guest within political circles, including her friendship with the Clintons, as well as a constant presence among the upper elite. It was precisely this crossroads position that inadvertently brought her and Michael into social gatherings that we would later recognize as intersection points of the Epstein system. The bond between Diana Ross and Michael Jackson is one of Hollywood's most beautiful and strangest stories. The fateful meeting with a boy named Michael Detroit, late 1960s, at the height of Motown Records' golden era. Michael was only 10 or 11 years old, a skinny, quiet boy standing small among his brothers in the Jackson 5. At the time, Diana Ross was already Motown's biggest female star. She was not just a singer, but a symbol in whom Berry Gordy placed absolute trust. According to many accounts from within Motown, Diana Ross encountered the Jackson 5 during internal rehearsals and showcase sessions, closed performances intended for label executives, producers, and top artists. It was in those modest rehearsal rooms that she noticed Michael. When Motown decided to introduce the Jackson 5 to the world, Diana Ross did more than promote them. She personally put her name behind their 1969 launch campaign, introducing the group and attaching her own reputation to theirs in performances and media appearances. But their relationship quickly moved beyond professional boundaries. Diana Ross was often present backstage behind the scenes, after shows where the lights go out and loneliness begins. There, she taught Michael things no school could teach. She showed him how to carry himself, how to face the flash of cameras, and how to preserve his identity amid the madness of fame. For Michael, this was the first time an adult did not treat him as a money-making machine. Michael grew up surrounded by packed schedules, hotel rooms, and endless tours. He never had a true childhood. In that context, Diana Ross became a form of family, something Michael had always lacked. She did not replace his biological mother, but she gave him a sense of protection. That bond endured for decades, even after Michael became the most famous artist on the planet. They did not see each other every day, but Diana's presence in Michael's life was spiritual rather than physical. Michael loved her so deeply that in his will, he named Diana Ross as the backup guardian for his children if their mother were to pass away. That level of trust was absolute. Diana Ross was the one who opened the door to the upper world for Michael. For Michael, the world beyond fame was filled with traps and exploitation. Celebrity brought light, but it also attracted hands reaching out for profit, money, and power. Michael understood that. And that is why he never actively sought out elite society on his own. The person who did was Diana Ross. Diana understood exactly how America's upper circles functioned. She knew who was worth engaging with, who should be greeted politely and kept at a distance, and who should never be allowed too close. More importantly, she knew how to keep Michael in the right position, visible, respected, but never consumed. Diana Ross never took Michael out networking in a showy or transactional way. She did it as someone who already belonged to that world. She brought Michael with her, never letting him appear alone. She introduced him in the language of protection, not publicity. She placed Michael in the role of artist icon legacy, not as someone in need of help. In those spaces, Michael was not the loud king of pop on stage. He was the man Diana Ross brought with her. That alone functioned as a powerful passport. For decades, Diana Ross was the strongest and most consistent voice defending Michael against brutal accusations. She did not rely on legal arguments. She relied on love. And precisely because of that shadow-like bond between them, when the media sought to shape a suggestive narrative around Michael Jackson within the Epstein files, they did not hesitate to pull Diana Ross into it as well. When people look at the photo of Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, and Bill Clinton at the Apollo Theater, some try to see a conspiracy. But placed in its proper context, the image tells a very different story. It was a public fundraising event. It took place on a historic black stage. And it shows a woman standing beside her spiritual son, guiding him into circles she believed could protect him. No secrecy, no privacy, no darkness, just the faith of a spiritual mother. Yet the irony is sharp. Those same circles of power, those same political friends later became the quietest voices when Michael was surrounded by declassified files and insinuations. Diana Ross stood there caught between two worlds. On one side, her pure love for Michael. On the other, the complexity of an elite society she was undeniably part of. If there is one thing that must be made clear, it is this: Diana Ross did not lead Michael into darkness. She led him into a light she believed was safe. The tragedy is that this light too turned out to have shadows. Shadows that even Diana Ross could not fully control. Enter Epstein's circle, a dangerous phrase. In media language, the phrase Epstein's circle functions as a psychological trap. It conditions us to assume that anyone who appears within it must be part of a criminal machine. But pause for a moment and look at the reality of the ultra-elite. In the world of billionaires and politicians, a circle is in truth a vast social network. Being present at a fundraising gala, a charity concert, or a law office does not mean you know what the host does behind closed doors or in their private life. At the level of Michael Jackson or Diana Ross, life unfolds inside a bubble surrounded by managers, security, and advisors. The reality is simple. No one knows the full truth about another person. You can dine with someone for 10 years without ever knowing they are running an illicit operation. Social interaction and participation in a criminal system are two very different things, yet the media deliberately blurs that fragile line. Michael Jackson may have met Epstein to discuss financial matters, a social or professional meeting, but he never appeared within the operational system of crime. No flight logs, no evidence of involvement in dark activities. So how much control did a woman like Diana Ross truly have over the life of the king of pop? Diana Ross was not Michael's gatekeeper. She was a spiritual guide. If she invited Michael to a Democratic Party political gala, where Epstein happened to be present, that was not granting access. It was simply sharing social space. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Jeffrey Epstein still wore the cloak of a generous billionaire, an intellectual philanthropist, and a close associate of presidents. If even intelligence agencies had not yet moved against Epstein at that time, how could a legendary singer like Diana Ross have seen through his true nature? Perhaps what Diana Ross is truly acknowledging is not that she knew Epstein was dangerous and still introduced Michael to him. The admission is one of regret. I regret bringing Michael into power circles that were far too complex, where his innocence was used as a shield for others. She watched Michael stand beside politicians, stand beside billionaires, and she believed this was a way to elevate his position. She never knew that 20 years later, she would have unknowingly placed her spiritual son inside a file that would be used to tarnish the legacy of them both. Culture race and misunderstanding. Michael Jackson did not have a normal childhood. He was a working machine from the age of 5. He stood under stage lights governed by tour schedules, weighed down by adult expectations with every breath he took. His childhood did not unfold in backyards or classrooms. It was torn apart between recording studios, endless tours, and applause that never stopped. That is why when Michael created Neverland, it was not eccentricity. It was therapy. Neverland was not an escape from the present, but a desperate attempt to reclaim fragments of a childhood that had been stolen. In Michael's world, children represented the last remaining form of purity. No agendas, no self-interest, no calculation. Around children, he was not the king of pop, not a symbol, not a multi-million-dollar asset. He was simply Michael. But the adult world refused to accept that simplicity. That world is conditioned to view everything through the lens of power and control. And when it fails to understand behavior rooted in deep psychological trauma, it chooses the easiest path, sexualizing it. Acts of protection are twisted into suspicion. Innocence is reinterpreted as deviance. Pain is transformed into sensational headlines. There is another truth rarely discussed yet critically important cultural difference within Black communities. In many traditional Black families, shared living spaces and communal childcare are expressions of closeness and solidarity. Western media and white elite institutions imposed their own moral framework onto Michael Jackson. They labeled his closeness as abnormal, simply because it did not align with their rigid and often biased worldview. They did not try to understand where Michael came from. They asked only one question: why isn't he like us? And because he wasn't, he became a target. Michael Jackson was not judged for what he did, but for failing to fit the power structures of those doing the judging. In a world that shows little tolerance for difference, a Black man with the soul of a child was simply too much to accept. Who does the media need to blame? Do you see the absurdity? There is a contradiction in the Epstein files that's impossible to ignore. The names that hold real power, politicians, billionaires, decision-makers, disappear behind thick Black redactions justified by vague phrases like security, privacy, or national interest. And Michael Jackson is placed front and center unredacted, despite the absence of any specific criminal allegation. The media needs a face, a villain large enough to absorb the public's fury. And no one fits that role better than a legend who spent his entire life surrounded by controversy. Michael is gone. He cannot hold a press conference. He cannot sue back. And most importantly, he can no longer cause problems for the system. In a power play that is the perfect definition of a scapegoat, famous enough to spark outrage, silent enough not to resist, familiar enough for the public to react on instinct rather than ask questions. While the crowd argues over a dead artist, those who truly operate power step quietly out of frame, safe behind layers of black ink. And here comes the truly chilling blow. The Michael Biopic Coincidence or Script 2025 to 2026. In 2026, just as the Michael biopic is set to ignite theaters worldwide, the Epstein files are released in this exact manner. No new evidence, no new accusations, just placing Michael's name next to a symbol of collective evil. History has done this before. Every time Michael approached a peak record-breaking sales control over music rights or a resurgence of public reputation, old ghosts were summoned, magnified, and released at precisely the right moment. The fastest way to neutralize a legend's influence is to attach their name to the darkest things imaginable. History is repeating itself. Every time Michael is on the verge of another milestone, the old ghosts are let loose. Diana Ross, at 81. An awakening in silence. At 81, Diana Ross does not speak to accuse anyone, nor does she feel the need to defend herself. Her acknowledgement does not live in words, but in the unspoken fragments she leaves behind. She is helping us understand this. There are circles of power that even she could never fully control, and Michael was pulled into them as a victim of his own innocence. There are things that cannot be said publicly because of legal and safety barriers. But if you connect enough context, the Clinton Foundation email server's global initiatives, you begin to see that Diana Ross was not an accomplice, but a witness, watching her child being torn apart by powerful sharks. Just because you read it in a magazine or see it on TV, don't make it factual. Michael Jackson sang in Tabloid Junkie. Think beyond the sensational headlines. Read the fine print buried between the pages of those files. Don't let your emotions be steered by carefully constructed media narratives. The world owes Michael Jackson an apology, and it owes all of us real transparency. The dead cannot speak, but we the living still have the right to ask questions. The truth does not live in accusations, it lives in the silences. At 81, Diana Ross does not stand up to confess, in the dramatic way the media expects. She does not say "I was wrong." She does not say Michael was innocent. What she does is leave context behind. The context of a powerful woman who was never all-powerful. The context of a musical legend too pure to fully grasp the layers of power. And the context of an elite world where silence is sometimes the price of survival. If Diana Ross did in fact allow Michael Jackson to step into those circles, it was not out of ambition, not out of self-interest, but out of the mistaken belief that power could protect fragility. History has proven the opposite. Power does not protect innocence, it consumes it. Michael Jackson did not leave behind a final self-defense, but he left behind music. He left behind lyrics that warned us about the media, about manipulation, about how truth can be bent by a camera angle and a headline. This story is not only about Michael, it is about how the world treats those who are no longer here to speak for themselves. And perhaps what Diana Ross ultimately admits is not guilt, but the quiet regret of a spiritual mother who believed she could protect and ultimately could only watch. Do you believe Michael Jackson was a victim of a system, or simply a name used to distract public attention? Was Diana Ross a powerless protector, or a witness who understood more than anyone else? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you want to keep exploring the stories behind the spotlight. Thank you for staying until the very end. See you in the next video.
We do not make any absolute claims regarding the accuracy of the data presented, and we are not responsible for any personal decisions made based on the content of this video. Legends never truly die, as long as we remember them. If you want to help us keep these stories alive, please subscribe to Silent Legends. What is your fondest memory of this icon? Share it in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. Click this video right here on your screen. It's a journey you don't want to miss. Until next time.